Thank you very much. My name's Todd Greene. How many people here have heard about PubNub? Anyone here know about PubNub? Good, I've got, well, a pretty small audience. That's great. So I have a lot of people I can tell new things about. I've been asked here to come here to talk about two things. The first is PubNub itself, and we have a pretty good success story in the IoT space as well as a few other industries. And then secondly, talk about some of the success factors of starting your own IoT business or product, whether it's within a large company or a startup itself. Given that we have many, many customers now using our infrastructure to build IoT companies, there's been a lot of questions about what patterns have you seen. So what is PubNub? We're what we call a data stream network, and I'll talk about what that is. When we started the company with this simple realization about 5 years ago that more and more companies across more and more applications were building solutions that needed to have real-time data, data in motion all the time, emitting data, absorbing data, and most of our infrastructure we always use is about data at rest, just receiving information from a database and displaying it to a user. And every time we wanted to build infrastructure for real-time synchronous kinds of applications, well, it was expensive, it was painful, and most companies did it poorly. So we asked the question, can we build an infrastructure globally distributed that works so that any company across, whether it's IoT, financial applications, anything else, can easily build applications that have streaming capabilities, the ability to stream stock quotes, the ability to stream sensor data in a way that works in any kind of situation. And we've done that. We've actually started this about 5 years ago. And we're now operating at a pretty massive scale. What you're looking at here is a tiny subset of the traffic going through our system. This is less than 1/10,000th of the current traffic going through our system on a second-by-second basis. Every big dot you see is someone publishing data into our network, and the small dots are the devices receiving that data in a quarter of a second or less. And we took the ideas of the messaging space, the TIBCOs of the world and others, where we basically do publish and subscribe. But then we extend that idea out to any device, any component, anywhere in the world. So why do people use a PubNub and don't build things themselves? A lot of different reasons. But really, at the end of the day, it's about two-way, secure control of devices in real time. And so there's all of these things that basically that can trip you up when you're doing this. One of the things we offer is 15 global points of presence, so that no matter where you deploy your IoT devices, you've got low latency and the ability to control them anywhere. We basically also worked a lot to provide SDKs on 70 different devices, so that 70 different kinds of devices. So pretty much embedded devices, small chipsets, iPhones, Androids, servers, browsers, desktops. You could do a ubiquitous streaming application across the board. And I'll talk about some of the use cases here. Catching up when devices go into tunnels, so if you lose data streams, they catch back up when you pop out. All these things you don't think about when you're building device control kinds of applications in the lab. Everything works great. But when you take them into the outside world and you're dealing with firewalls and tunnels and cellular networks and everything else, things fall down. Doing this under minimum battery drain and bandwidth usage, and doing it in an encrypted way that works behind firewalls, works just about anywhere. What we found out after we built the company in 2010 when we launched it was we started to get lots of demand for new features. And so like any good company, you start to listen to your customers. And over time, we've built out an entire network that does not just real-time communication for devices, but presence detection, because we know if devices are online or offline, so we give you that data in real time, storing and playing back those data streams. Access control layer, so you can provide security and then syndicate your streams of data to monetize the data from your IoT projects. And finally, stream control, the ability to multiplex and do things to the data as it goes through our network. You can think of us as a smart network. In fact, a good analogy here is if you look at the way the internet has sort of exploded, 25 years ago, companies were building out the core infrastructure for the internet, level 3, Comcast, Verizon, and so on. What they're really doing is providing TCP, UDP, so protocols, and providing peering and routing services. About 12 years later, you saw companies like Akamai and all of its competitors launch CDNs, so they could take static content and cache it around the world, so your web pages and your mobile apps will load quickly no matter where you are. Now, fast forward again about 10 years, it's the same kind of analogy for data in motion, providing data centers around the world, not for static data, but for data that moves very quickly, that you only care about for maybe a half a second, like a stock quote or a temperature reading from a device, things like that. So PubNub, the best way to think about us, or a data stream network in general, is as like a CDN for real-time streams of data. So we speak the protocols of WebSockets and Comets and MQTT and CoAP and all the real-time protocols you're seeing. And we basically provide services on those protocols like presence, publish, subscribe data, security, and so on. So the kinds of people using these applications are pretty varied, or our services are pretty varied. In the connected car space, Uber has spent tens of millions of dollars at building their own infrastructure. Every one of their competitors uses PubNub. Lyft, Sidecar, GetTaxi, Zoomy, and so on. Car telematics information, same way. You can say the same thing for smart homes. You need to create a secure socket connection to every device, so you're now network ubiquitous. So let's think about it from an end user perspective. I install a bunch of smart home components. I'm driving home. I don't want to have to only be on my home network to open my garage door or turn on a light. Now, with people that have embedded PubNub, like Logitech, Insteon, Vivint, and others, you can now be anywhere and anywhere in the world, your cellular network, your office network, turn on a light, open a garage door, and we do all the tunneling through protocols and everything else. So it takes care of what most people just sort of hand-wave over when they're building these applications, those lines on their IoT diagram. We just provide in a secure, reliable way. And it's worked out really well for us. We now have we're averaging about 250,000 transactions a second through our network today. We've got over 200 million devices connected. We manage socket connections all over the world, actually 15 data centers now. We have over 1,000 customers that pay us, and we're adding about 60 or more customers per month. So that's worked out pretty well for us, and it's really identified an opportunity that I think a lot of companies have sort of glossed over, which is, guess what? Just because IoT has the letter I, Internet, doesn't mean that the internet out of the box gives you all the connectivity you need for any sort of secure or real-time connectivity solution for device control or even just getting data from devices. And so by sort of broadening into that niche, we've been able to expand and really find interesting opportunities across a lot of different industries. In fact, I gave 2 examples, but we're playing in about 20 industries today, even outside of IoT, or things that are blurry, like mobile to IoT to financial services and things like that. So one of the things I was asked to do here is to talk about some thoughts and recommendations for people creating their own IoT projects or products. So let me talk about those. First of all, one thing is that people don't realize usually when they're talking about IoT is that you got to start thinking about the fact that you're selling a service and not a piece of hardware anymore. And that's a huge mental jump we see for some of our customers to make, especially if they've been in hardware for a long time. You spend a lot of time thinking about your hardware. But if you think about, let's look at DropCam for a second. How many people have heard of DropCam? People know DropCam? Okay. If you Google DropCam, what shows up is almost always the picture on the left-hand side, which is a black circular piece of plastic. It's a very nice black circular piece of plastic, but it's not really the value, right? The value is on the right side. It's the portal. It's the service that you're paying for monthly, that you're actually getting all this great security data that you weren't getting before with other security cameras because you had to build all that stuff or manage it yourself. And that goes on for things like Fitbit as well. You Google it again, you get the picture on the left, which is another black, nicely designed piece of plastic. At the end of the day, what people really care about is the thing on the right. It's the portal, it's the information, it's the value you get from the data. Now that's obvious to most of us in this room, but it's amazing to see how much people say that it's obvious, but they put their best engineers, their best minds on the hardware piece, and the software becomes an afterthought. So thinking about IoT as a service as opposed to hardware is a really critical thing. And it's difficult for people to accept. We say, we're not really a hardware company anymore. Your hardware is disposable. That's a really hard thing to get across to people who have grown up in the hardware world. It's a service and data that matters, and the online experience needs to be given as much focus as, and that's not just for consumer, by the way, even industrial IoT, it's the data that people are buying. That's the reason they want to move from a dumb device to a smart device. So that's a key critical point. Next rule that we've seen is proving out the business model. Everyone gets very excited about IoT because there's these promises of recurring revenue and everything else. But what we've actually seen in the real world is that you don't always find a recurring revenue model for your IoT device. However, there are guaranteed recurring costs, right? Whether you're paying PubNub, whether you're hosting your own servers or all of the above, you've got an ongoing operation to manage those devices remotely. And it turns out that in many cases, the economics don't work out initially. It's really important to think about the economics behind these IoT businesses, because as much as everyone says, yeah, it's all about the data, we're going to monetize the data, and people are going to pay us a subscription fee, that's not always the case. And so it's a key thing to think about, and the way to get over that in many cases is to create an ecosystem, meaning in a perfect world, getting other companies to care about the data that you are generating, or being able to consume data from other companies so that there's basically a critical mass of information that provides even more benefit to users. So by figuring out ways to syndicate the data from your IoT projects or products to partners, to monetize that, gives you another revenue source, again, that sounds good, But I recently finished a survey of over 150 IoT companies, and what was really interesting to me was over 95% of them said, yeah, we collect the data, we know it's got some value, we don't know what to do with it just yet, we don't have any data scientists, we don't have any way to integrate it to our partners, and in fact, to save money on hard drives, we format those hard drives once every 5 or 6 months. So the promise and the reality aren't always there. And again, if you're focused just on the hardware piece and not on the full ecosystem story, you're missing out. So the third is the obvious one that, again, people usually ignore, that a breach in security will kill you and can kill your business, and potentially more than just your business. There's a lot of great, salacious news stories about people attaching devices on their cats, and the cat walks into the, or someone else's cat, the cat walks into the house and they steal the Wi-Fi password. But we actually have seen really significant things. I know that the Federal Trade Commission here in the US is proud of the fact that they had their first successful IoT security prosecution, where they fined TrendNet for actually having cameras that were declared secure that were not at all secure. And hackers were creating huge web pages full of little thumbnails of live cameras from people's nanny cams and bedrooms and places like that. Even the Target credit card breach actually happened through an IoT hole if you Google that. So there's lots and lots of breaches that are happening today. And the reason for that, I think, is that there's really no codified security model for IoT. We don't know how to do it. And the reason for that is there's a lot of things to think about. We usually think about encryption, but it's way more than that. It's the physical device vulnerability. What are the legislative requirements around security region by region of the world? For example, there's very specific rules in the EU, the European Union, about data privacy that you have to keep in mind. So legislative compliance, firmware updates, lots and lots of things to be concerned about. And it's unrealistic for us to expect security for all of these IoT projects if we expect every development team to have to invent it from scratch every time. We don't do that with a banking app, right? Just to go over to our web and mobile stacks today. People coming out of college know what technology stacks they're going to use to build that web or mobile banking app, right? They incorporate well-known security models. They use a CDN for scale. They use interoperable standards. It's a pretty well-understood thing. But in IoT today, it doesn't look like that at all. Today, you're inventing from scratch for every project. We're leaving security up to the developers. We have no sort of codified approach to how we do things. And so in order to kind of step aside for a second and think about that, it means that we need to define a stack for IoT. And I'm not going to come up here and sort of define a single stack. I'll show some ideas. But at the end of the day, just like it took us 10 to 15 years in web and mobile to come up with an interoperable stack, we have LAMP stacks and Java stacks and .NET stacks and lots of ways of doing things. It's going to take time in IoT. But things are different in IoT, right? First of all, business logic happens everywhere along the stack. It's no longer just in one place. Now we have to think about what are the software and what are the hardware considerations on the device level. What about local connectivity gateways and things like that? What kind of data stream network or other network are we going to be sending this data through globally? And then how does that interact with big data systems and actions and triggers on the back end? So the stack starts to look very different from our typical web and mobile infrastructure. And we're still in the very infancy of what are the standard ways of doing things. And until that, we're going to see a lot of hiccups, a lot of failures. And it's a great opportunity for IoT platform companies, companies that come on board with some technology and a lot of professional services to build things top to bottom for you. But the downside is that means that whatever is built is custom, it's hard to upgrade, and it really doesn't sort of support whatever emerging standards will eventually evolve in the future. So the last one I wanted to talk about is just designing for reliability and remote management. And you don't want to win the Guinness Book of World Records for creating the most number of doorstops in the shortest amount of time. Just recently, an IoT company published a firmware update that bricked a third of all their devices, just turned them off. So, there's a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of sort of sloppiness today that's happening with respect to how we do these things remotely. And if you compare something like Google Chromecast, which is a nice, easy plug-and-play provisioning and deployment and upgrade product versus your typical home Wi-Fi router, that is almost impossible to upgrade the firmware on, and most people don't even know how to do it. There's a long way to go to get to a place where our devices sort of are maintained remotely, globally, and can be managed in a way that's secure and safe. So just to summarize here, you're selling a service, not hardware. Number two, it's important to prove out the business model. A breach in security can kill you and really lends to the argument that a stack doesn't yet exist for IoT. And finally, designing for reliability and remote management is something that we're still in the infancy of. So these are some of the stumbling blocks we've seen our customers run through. I think it's still very early days. And until we see these things become codified and well understood, we're going to see a lot of Generation 1 IoT projects stumble, fail, take a long time to get to market, and cost a lot of money. So that's what we're hoping we'll start to see happen over the next 5 years. And thank you very much. Appreciate the time.